Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Bhasin, a reporter with Bloomberg News covering athletic companies. And I'm here today with Ryan Gellert, the CEO of Patagonia. Now, Patagonia is not just a jacket selling company, they've been involved in environmental issues over the past several decades. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan.
That's good to be here with you, Kim. Thanks.
Now, I want to start off by picking up our conversation from about 6 months ago when I wrote a story about you for Bloomberg Green magazine. And at that point, you were still just a few months into your job. You had still been working from Amsterdam instead of headquarters out in California. It's been about a year since then. How has that first year been during the pandemic as we came out of lockdown and things kept changing?
It's been a pretty dynamic year, for me, for all of us at Patagonia, and I think for most people around the world. It's really forced us to readjust kind of everything about how we work together, shake up a lot of priorities, but it's also really been a good year for us, a valuable year for us to kind of really kind of distill down what's most important to us and figure out new and creative ways to move that work forward.
And how has your work life changed? You've moved halfway across the world now. You're is everyone still working from home? What's the deal there?
I mean, work life's kind of unrecognizable from 2 years ago, that's for sure. I am on the other side of the planet, but I think, it's just interesting. I spend so much time doing what you and I are doing right now, which is having conversations from behind a computer screen. I'm here in the office. I work out of the office just about every day. There are some people that come in, but our offices are not open. Our retail stores are, our distribution centers are. So a lot of the business is fully open and has been for some time. And we're looking at reopening offices probably in March of next year.
So, what are some of the big initiatives on the activism side that have popped up over that first year as CEO?
Yeah, I think I used the word distill before. I think one of the really important exercises that we've gone through this year is really just stepping back and kind of saying, what are all the things we're working on and how do these things tie together? And I think, in a world where our days are 24 hours like everybody else and our resources are what they are, no more, no less, I think it's really important sometimes to kind of take inventory and ask, where can we have the biggest impact? So I think one of the things we've been really focused on this year is just looking thoughtfully at how all the pieces hold together as part of our broader climate strategy. And so that's something that we've been really engaged in. We've released some information on our website about our carbon footprint and the composition of that, and then what we're doing in the way of minimizing our footprint and what we're doing in the way of advocacy. And I mentioned those two because I think advocacy is impossible if you don't have some credibility in, moving with a sense of urgency and boldness in your own footprint. And then I am a huge, huge believer that much the same way we're not going to be able to recycle our way out of this problem as individuals, we're not going to be able to decarbonize our individual businesses out of this problem either. I think it's really going to take systemic change. And so we've been focused a lot on where can we participate in that.
And recently, Patagonia released its climate framework. Can you tell me about that and what the goals are?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the framework itself, what are we trying to accomplish in both communicating it and tying it together as a strategy? It's as I said a moment ago, it's really two pillars. It's our footprint and what are we holding ourselves to? And particularly as a company that I think at this point has got a really clear sense of what our footprint is and what the composition, and then therefore it puts us in a position where we can increasingly and with more precision define what the levers are to minimize our footprint. And so I can talk to you about a bunch of tools we've brought online to do that. But the other pillar that I think is critically important, and candidly, I think it's generally under supported and underinvested in from the business sector writ large, is the advocacy piece. I think really recognizing, within the business sector, I think there's been this evolution from leadership on these topics looking like statements that say, I support this, to now leadership coming in the form of companies starting to put one foot in front of the other and taking responsibility for their individual footprint. But that's not going to get us there. And so I think the third piece that's so critical is also participating in that systemic change that's needed.
And I believe there's a big splash across that page that says the climate crisis is our business.
Mm-hmm.
And a phrase that's repeated several times on there is not enough. It says not enough this, not enough that. What's not enough?
Well, I think, as I said a minute ago, let me step back and frame it this way. I think the climate and ecological crisis is an existential threat to us as humans, number one. I think number two, it's an existential threat that we as humans have created. And so I think what we need is every lever of society working together, taking individual and collective responsibility for this. And so I think individuals need to make decisions in their lives that minimize their footprint. Individuals need to engage in part of their role as civil society to put in place the kind of leadership and set the kind of priorities that are going to allow us to work through this. So I think that's the role of individuals. And that's not going to be enough. I think governments need to do what governments candidly were founded to do, which is help solve the biggest problems that we as humans face. And I don't think that government is doing nearly enough. And the business sector has a role, and I think it's an outsized role, given the significance of the issue and also the responsibility in creating this problem that the business sector writ large has created. And so I think that that's taking responsibility within our individual businesses to decarbonize and think about how we, think about the full impact that we have. But it's also in driving systemic change. And here's a point I really want to make clearly, because it's something that I've really been wrestling with a lot of late in having conversations with the CEOs of a lot of other companies. There is a real disconnect between what businesses are saying to their employees and what businesses are saying to their customers, and what businesses directly and indirectly through their lobbyists are saying to government. And that's a huge problem. And so I would, focus specifically on the disconnect between the membership of the Business Roundtable and the strategy that the Business Roundtable and the American Chamber of Commerce are deploying to try to undermine the reconciliation package and process, which has the most ambitious climate goals that we've seen in a decade.
So let's talk about corporate responsibility a bit more. What do you think is the problem with how can we actually hold companies responsible for the promises they make?
Well, I think that you play a unique role on this, and others like you in the media. I'd love to tell you that business leaders and corporations are going to wake up tomorrow and go, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. Let me make sure that it all sounds the same and the intent's the same across the landscape. I have no confidence that's going to happen. I think it's going to take pressure, and it's going to take pressure from customers. It's going to hopefully also part of this will be regulation from government. And I hate saying that, but that's where we're at, and that's what's needed. And so let's do it. But I think it's going to require that businesses are willing to not only pay their taxes, but pay an appropriate amount of tax via established tax rates to ensure that the programs that we all know we need can get off the ground. And I think that business leaders, particularly through their trade associations, have really got to ask themselves some tough questions. And I think others need to ask those same tough questions of them. Is that in fact happening right now?
So back to Patagonia on this. How do you do this kind of marketing without greenwashing? How do you prove to consumers that you are in fact doing something?
Well, I don't think we can prove to consumers anything. I don't any more than I think we can prove to media that we're doing anything. I think what we can do is have conversations. What we can do is seek to be as transparent as we know how to do. And we can continue to do this over years and decades and build a body of work. And I think in doing that, then it becomes, it's like opinions. I can't tell you what your opinion ought to be. And so I don't think that I have the right to define or answer the question candidly, are we greenwashing or not? What I think I've got the right to do is share openly our beliefs and our actions and do it in a way that's transparent and do it over, again, broad periods of time so that people can form their own opinions about the intent of business. I would say this, and let me be clear, it applies to Patagonia like it applies to any other business out there. I really appreciate and respect the fact that people's default setting is cynicism towards the statements that businesses make. I think that is what it ought to be. I think it's unfortunate that that's what it needs to be, but I think that's exactly what it ought to be.
So 6 months ago, we talked about election night. And back then, let me make sure I get this quote right. You said, it was like taking a lot of bricks out of your backpack as you're trudging uphill. What was that like? And what's your mindset now?
I remember having that conversation. I was sitting in Europe at the time. I think that what probably a thought that was in the back of my head a lot at that time was the answer to a question I remember Madeleine Albright providing in a town hall meeting I watched her participate in. And the question from a European um, um, uh, media person was, hey, look, we had 8 years of Barack Obama, the first African American president, and then it's followed by 4 years of Donald Trump. What's the real America? And her very pensive and thoughtful response was, we'll see in the next election. And I think that was the voice kind of ringing in my ear as I was waiting to see the returns of the election. So I think that, for us, it's been a very different engagement with the current administration than the last. A point that I have made many times and will make here again is we're not an extension of the Democratic Party, and we're not a company that is averse to conservative points of view. We're a company in business to save our home planet, and we engage through that prism. And that prism, to be clear, continues to sort of expand out and include some other areas that I feel very strongly about, and access to the ballot and voting rights is one of them.
And you were very active during that election with voting, and then in Georgia as well. You kept some employees there working with voting rights organizations. Do you see that last election as a success?
I don't look. I mean, I think the only thing that we can gauge success on is the overall health of the planet. And I don't think there's anything that suggests that's moving in the right direction. And so we've got an administration that views that very differently. I admire and align with a lot of their beliefs. But if you measure it on what have they actually been able to deliver at this point, I don't think anybody can feel very good about that. And if you step back even further and not think about it as just through the lens of American politics or even politics writ large, and you say, how's the planet doing? How's the health of the planet? What trajectory are we on? Where is this going to take us? I don't think there's anything to get excited about.
So your relationship with the previous administration was famously combative, I would describe it. You sued them over public lands and so on. Now, things are different now, but what's it like working with the Biden administration?
Again, I'd start by saying that we've aligned with administrations over time on different issues, and we fought with them, and that's whether there's Democratic administrations, Republican administrations, otherwise. What I would say, though, to your question, what's it been like? There's been a lot of engagement, and the engagement's been across a broad swath of topics with many different people from the administration. So direct engagement with the White House on a couple of issues. One is Bears Ears and the reestablishment of the Obama borders of America's newest national monument, Bears Ears in Southeast Utah. The other is around paid leave and support for working families, which is an issue that is extremely important to us, and it's an issue that we have on behalf of our own employees. Had for many decades a lot of things in place, including on-site child development center. So it's an issue that we feel very strongly about and think that we have some legitimate point of view to be considered on. So those are some of those examples. We've worked with John Kerry around, the intersection of business and climate. And as I described before, I don't think with a lot of success collectively. And then there's been a host of other areas, including with, Department of Commerce and elsewhere, and focused on how can we use the work that they do to put in place climate and earth-friendly policies, and how can that connect with trade.
I do want to get into Bears Ears more. Can you take us through that saga over the past 4 years and then the conclusion coming up to now?
Yeah, well, I would say first that, we've been involved in trying to protect that area for about a decade. Like any work that we do, it's with local communities. So this is not a Patagonia campaign. This is really in support of the local communities and trying to be additive to the desire of people on the ground, particularly indigenous populations in the area in Southeast Utah, to protect those areas. And so that's been how we have gotten into it. It is an area that's got great outdoor sport connection, but that's not been our primary focus on it. But, it's not lost on probably too many people that's also part of it. It's a place that I've rock climbed for many years, some of the best rock climbing in the world. So that's what's brought us into it. We've been into it for about a decade. At the end of Obama's presidency, he put into place protections about 1.35 million acres. And then very early in President Trump's administration, he reversed that and collapsed the borders by about 85%. And so President Obama, under the leadership of Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland has reestablished the original boundaries about a month ago, which we feel is a tremendous step in the right direction.
Have you been there recently?
Yeah, I was there. Funny enough, I was actually headed there for the first time in many years at the same time that President Biden announced the day I was leaving. Actually, I got an invitation to the White House to join a ceremony around, it was a signing ceremony around public lands, and that was as much information as there was. It was pretty clear that this was going to be related to Bears Ears. And I was actually flying out that day with my son to go to Bears Ears and spend some time. So thought about going to Washington and believed ultimately that it would just be most unique and valuable to be on the ground in Bears Ears with the local community and tribal leaders who have invested so much and candidly lost a lot along the way, including trust and hope. As this momentous moment took place, and so I was in the region that day, and with my 10-year-old son, which was, I mean, candidly one of the highlights not just in my professional life but in my life, full stop.
And you're not just focused on the Utah wilderness. There's all sorts of other projects going on out there. Can you tell me about some other places that you're focused on?
Yeah, I mean, first it should be noted that we're focused on areas not just in the United States, but around the world. I believe very strongly in the framework that is, is really becoming kind of a live global discussion around 30 by 30, ultimately, with the hope for 50 by 50, and that's protecting 30% of our spaces around the world, both terrestrial and marine, by 2030, and then looking beyond that. We're very focused on the Tongass Forest in Alaska, very focused on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, also in Alaska. But, an area that's really important to me, and I've been personally involved in for 6-7 years now, is protecting Europe's last wild rivers. And those flow solely in the Balkan Peninsula. And there are, every river in the heart of Europe has been channelized and dammed and rerouted and impacted. And the only natural rivers, whatever's left in all of Europe, is in the Balkan Peninsula. And so I'm actually headed over to Europe the week after next to meet at the invitation of the Prime Minister of Albania to talk about creating Europe's first wild river national park around the Vjosa River, which flows from the mountains of Greece across Albania to the Adriatic Sea. It's about 160 kilometers, and it's just a beautiful and pristine river. So I have really high hopes that maybe we can play some small role in permanently protecting that.
How do you decide what to devote resources to with so many? This could be infinite, right? How do you decide which ones to go for?
I think it's two things. One is I think you hit on a point that I've been reflecting on, and we all here at Patagonia have been reflecting on a lot over the last year, and that is, how do we avoid being a mile wide and an inch deep, and how instead do we figure out, kind of what is that framework where we think we can be most additive? And I think the easiest thing for us to do is identify things we're passionate about and get excited about making a contribution to them. I think the hardest thing for us to do is say no to anything, because there are so many areas in need and we want to be involved in so many things. And I think one of the things we've come to recognize is there are times where we need to say no so that we can make the yeses count more. And I think that's something we've been really focused on. But to answer your question, I think it's overwhelmingly community led. It's really trying to be networked with communities on the front lines of issues and really try to understand what's most important to them, why, and where can we have the biggest impacts. I think the other thing we've been thinking about a lot this year is where do we have something uniquely additive to bring to this? I think, and I say this with, all humility, but I think we're pretty good storytellers. We're pretty good at activating community, and we've got some authenticity that comes from being involved in this work for a number of decades. And so I think really figuring out where is the nexus between the need and what we can bring to this, and that's where we try to focus.
And we've talked a lot about things that aren't what Patagonia sells, and you do run a large sportswear business. So with product, what are you working on in terms of sustainability and reducing your footprint?
Yeah, there's quite a bit there. I mean, I think some of our biggest priorities are getting all virgin petroleum-based fibers out of our product collection by 2025. Look, I'm unapologetic, or at least clear as I can be, about the fact that we make product that people love, that they want, that they don't necessarily need to survive. So, we have to understand that, that's the business we're in. And so we've got to take really a high level of responsibility for ensuring that we're minimizing our footprint. And so we do still make product today that has petroleum inputs, and we need to move past that. So that's one of the things we're highly focused on. One of the other things we're focused on, and this is very iterative based on our history, is really scaling this relationship that we have with our customers to help them keep their products in use as long as possible. And that's through product repair, which is, again, kind of a legacy of legacy programs within Patagonia. We run the largest apparel repair center in North America, and we have many facilities, direct and indirect, around the world on this, but also buying product back from people when it's still got usable life, but they're done using it. And upcycling, recycling, and ensuring that we have really taken responsibility for the end of life of everything we make. And again, it's one thing to kind of have these programs exist and pilot or exist at some level. It's another thing to put them at the heart of the business and really redefine what business we're in and move past being in the business of selling brand new product and diversifying that and being in the secondhand business and beyond. So those are some of the things that we're really focused on.
All right, Ryan, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for hopping on with me today to chat about all these things. I really appreciate you and I appreciate your time today.
It's great being with you, Kim. Thanks a ton.